think a lot of people like struggle. There's just so many different colliding things, whether that be perspectives or intentions or just the financialization of all of it, that it's pretty taxing mentally. And so we're gonna really go through it, I think, in 50 years. It's gonna be quite the story. And it's really just getting started.
All right, just finished episode 5 for long form conversation. So on this episode, I had Stephen Santoro on, who's a great guy. He's a curator at Vertu Fine Art, and he's showcasing some amazing work in Art Miami this year. We also talked about the recent Marfa 2025 experience, which was a lot of fun, and we touch on a bunch of interesting topics. So I think this is a really interesting episode. Give it a listen and hope you enjoy. Before we jump in, none of this is financial advice. This is for entertainment and information purposes only. Please take everything with a grain of salt and do your own research. More information can be found in the podcast episode description below. All right, now let's get into it. All right, Stephen, it's great to have you on the show, man. How are you doing these days?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. I know we just recently chatted yesterday about, just to touch base, but it's really great to have you on the podcast. I know you got lots of interesting perspectives. I think you have a really interesting role in this space, so I think it'll be good to kind of dig into things a little bit.
For sure. Let's do it.
All right, man. So, but first off, I just want to know, you recently moved to New York City. So, how have things been?
It's actually, a few years now.
Oh my God, time flies.
Yeah, it's been 4 or 5 years now. Still, I think the art hub of the world, at least, if not 1, 2, or 3. There's just so much going on here. It's just an exciting place to be. And there's still so much room to grow, especially in our world. But yeah, it's hectic times in New York always, especially coming from Boca Raton, where I grew up, where things are a little more relaxed and chilled. But no, it's fun times out here.
Yeah, and weather-wise, it's starting to get pretty chill, pretty chilly in New York, eh? Especially up here in Canada, we have a blanket of snow everywhere already, and it's like I'm already, me and my partner, we're looking at flights right now, trying to figure out where we're gonna go. Somewhere warm. So with your role, I know that you're a curator at Vertu Fine Art. So maybe just give us the backstory a little bit about your backstory, I guess, into the art world, broadly speaking, and kind of the role that you play at Vertu Fine Art. And then after, we can kind of dig into how you fell into this specific niche, this world that we're obsessed with here.
For sure. So I kind of grew up in the art world, and or not in the art world, but surrounded by art, and got really, really interested in it about probably when I was around 15, 16. Before then, it was kind of just a thing that I knew of, but really didn't express any interest. I was still too young to really understand what was going on. But around that time, I started to gain a real interest, and I started to form opinions. I wanted to know more about how the market plays and what were the values of things. And as the years went on, I just went deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole, and quickly realized that there were like kind of infinite things to play off of. A lot of that comes from the subjectivity. A lot of it comes from kind of how private the art world is. There's not a lot of information. There's not a lot of like good ways to learn, other than, I guess, being like educated on it in more traditional means. And so all of my real interest came from just my passion for it. I didn't really appreciate or understand kind of art history in the way that I maybe do now. It was more of like, this is kind of boring. I'm not really into this. And like, that's not, I guess, the kind of art that I was kind of gravitated towards. It was more so, I guess, stuff that just more connected with me, like going to art fairs, actually seeing things, going into galleries, witnessing it, And then even like social media, kind of just finding artists online and reaching out to them and kind of just forming that connection to see what it was like. What are the prices of things for someone who doesn't show in galleries? And um, so it's kind of all over the place, just like being curious. And I haven't lost that curiosity. I'm still just a very curious person, especially in our world now. There's just so much to learn. There's so much to appreciate. And yeah, I'm kind of just going on a tangent here, but that's kind of how I got started, was just being curious, and I grew up with it. Um, my dad is in the art world, and yeah, just trying to soak it up and learn as much as I could, just out of self passion, out of the appreciation for it.
That's awesome. Yeah, forever a student in this space, I feel like. So then what was the kind of like your main kind of like roles and responsibilities, you could say, while you're at Vertu Fine Art, as you kind of started to become more passionate, I guess, about the space? And you said that you were going to like art fairs, I guess, reaching out to artists. So I guess yeah, like maybe talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. At first it was just very informal. It was just me trying to get a grip and get an understanding of what was going on. Because I'm not a self, like I'm not like I guess I didn't go through the whole educated route of, like, I guess how most traditional patrons kind of went on to understand art. It was more so just like it was like a puzzle and like a game to me. It was like, how is this working? What does the system look like? How do you progress in your career as an artist? I've always heard that artists like just never make it, and if they do make it, most of the time they're perhaps dead, and so they don't even get to appreciate kind of the whole progression of people talking and the interests. And um, so it's kind of just being a student within my own world. Um, and once I kind of got a good grip of like a very small niche, which I would say is more of the contemporary art market, pop art, for example, like Warhol and Herring and Katz and Opie and kind of that whole market. Um, I realized that, wow, okay, there's like people who specialize in particular kinds of art. And then you can go even deeper to say some are going after originals and paintings and sculpture, and some are going after prints and different forms of printmaking. And there's a whole structure to that. And then you kind of get into like the representational aspect. Like, well, if I want this kind of artist, well, where do I go to get it? And it would kind of pan off to certain galleries. Um, and so the more and more I started to understand that there's kind of a whole infrastructure built around the art world, I could start to kind of navigate how someone went from maybe a early stage career artist to a mid career to a late career. Um, and that kind of gave me insight into like what it kind of takes to make it. And I kind of became obsessed with that. I would kind of I would study artist CVs, I would study gallery exhibition histories, and kind of just map out um, when does the artist kind of have that pop? Well, when do they when do valuations go up? When do what art fairs were kind of igniting some of that excitement? Um, and so again, it kind of went back to this kind of like puzzle with me. Um, I've always been like a math and science person. I never really knew how it would apply to art, which is, visual and kind of tapping into different parts of your brain. But I use that like my analytical mindset to kind of just um, turn it into this kind of new way of thinking, of trying to just map out the data into a way that I could then, parse and um, essentially make like what's the right word for it? Just like more easy to interpret, more easy to understand. Um, with that all being said, I was looking at like and I still do it. It's been like a daily practice for like 10 years now. I look at like a few hundred pieces of art every single day,
Wow.
trying to develop an understanding of my own taste, my own opinions, what I like, what I don't like, what's unique. Um, and that's just my brain kind of just churning that out. So that kind of collision of like taking that kind of data and analytics approach, with then looking at so much art every single day to see what I like, I kind of put that together. And that's kind of, I guess, my first version of like, this is my form of curation. This is what I like. These are the reasons why I like it. Um, and that kind of progressed more formalities within Vertu and the larger art world, because I started to identify, unique opportunities, and I had real reasons as to why I think that there was potential there. Um, and so I guess, throughout those times from like 16 to 20 years old, um, now I'm 27. It was very informal, very just self-taught kind of why and how does all this come together. And when I'd say 2021, it was more, okay, I understand it pretty in depth, and now I can feel confident and be convicted in why this is potentially a good opportunity, or why this is a good work of art.
That's awesome. And so I guess right at that time, once I guess you're building your experience as well as maybe even your confidence too, you're then in this moment in time where you have this massive boom in the blockchain art space. So maybe connect the dots there with regards to how these two kind of tracks kind of ended up meeting and converging. I'm assuming it was maybe around that time, but perhaps it was even earlier. I'm not sure.
No, it was, I would say, like a year or two later. Um, so yeah, I've been in crypto since 2017, but not art related at all. It was more opportunistic. Again, I'm just a curious person. I like to tinker with things. And when I discovered blockchain and crypto, I just could not believe what I had found. I just didn't know anything like this existed. But at the time, it was pure kind of like financial measure. And I didn't have any money. I had like maybe $1,000 to my name. But I was like, whoa, like I can actually do things with $1,000, because of the landscape. And I was just blown away with the kind of white papers that I was reading, and the potential that this tech kind of, and then this was deep in the ICO era where everything was kind of scammy and nothing came to fruition. But I was young and I didn't know, I just went with the flow, and I made a ton of money, and then I lost it all pretty much. And that's kind of that's the narrative for everyone in this space. Um, and I'm happy I went through that, because I learned a lot of lessons, but it kind of helped me gain insight to when I rediscovered crypto and then eventually NFTs in 2020. So that I probably left the space in like 2018 and then rediscovered it in 2020. And again, I went through this whole like holy shit moment, especially with NFTs. Like, I can never leave this world again. That's what I was telling myself. And I didn't even understand the application to the art world. I didn't know I didn't know that people were making art using these mediums and using the blockchain. I more so I approached it from like the gaming angle, and the more like real world use case angle of like, oh, our birth certificates are going to be NFTs. And so again, I just went into this state of shock of like, holy shit, like there is much potential here. And I thought I was early. I thought I was like going to have years to like tinker with this stuff and figure out what I really wanted to do with it. And I would say like 4 or 5 months later is when everything just started going absolutely crazy. And I was intimidated. Like, I saw just so many opportunities, and I could have made so much money, but I was just kind of, I guess, probably from my 2017, 2018 days, I was a little more cautious, because I knew not everything was going to last. But, I saw the come up of just crazy projects. And I knew, that from my past experiences that I wanted to build something meaningful, something that could last potentially. And I knew that that wasn't going to be some membership or PFP, or because I just didn't know. I just saw them go through these hype cycles. I was like, I don't want to launch something that people are going to forget about in a week. It won't make me feel good. So I ended up just learning and researching and just kind of like staying in the being more of a lurker and just soaking it all in for a year or two, and like passively participating. Um, but I knew that I wanted to build and help artists eventually. Um, but that kind of insight didn't come really until like early 2022. Um, I was deep in the Axie Infinity world because I just thought it was brilliant. I thought it was so interesting, and I learned just so much about the technicalities of blockchain and through game mechanics, because it's just the smart contract layer is kind of what powers all of it. And so that's probably what got me into the real technicalities of things, which I later applied to my interest in the art world. But yeah, when I discovered NFTs in the art perspective in 2022 or late 2021, I just was fascinated. I knew it was just far more interesting than anything I was doing traditionally. And so I tried initially to apply those learnings to this world, and I realized that just a completely different genotype of person. They weren't the same in kind of any respect. They had different ideas, different thoughts, different processes, different workflows, different ways of presenting the work. So yeah, at first it just didn't feel like anything that I learned previously was applicable. And I was it felt almost like I was taking a few steps back. And I kind of still feel that way to some degree. Because in the traditional art world, I was dealing with like very professional people who had practices, who were trained artists. And in our world, it's kind of more like myself as a curator, more self-taught, and um, just kind of like follow your ambitions and figure it out in real time. Um, and so, yeah, there was a real like collision in my head at times of like, what am I doing? Is this worth it? Um, but that valuable lesson in like 2018, like, I don't want to leave, I need to like stick through the pain, and eventually like the opportunities will come and I'll build meaningful things. And I feel like I'm on a good track now, and I've published some good projects, and starting to make my work, make my mark on the blockchain in ways that hopefully last.
For sure, man, for sure. You're definitely making a splash in this space. So then what was kind of like the 0 to 1 moment for you with regards to kind of like digging in and doing that research, kind of connecting all the dots in your mind with this space, and then actually going out and working with um, digital artists in the space? I remember seeing you for the first time. I met you in Miami in 2022 at the Miami Art Fair, and I was there with my partner and a friend, and we were just walking through, and I saw the Tyler Hobbs IOStream screen prints, just just on display there, and I was like, holy shit, this is amazing. And it was totally unexpected for me. And that's when I had the pleasure of meeting you, and I met your dad there as well. And so I'm assuming that was that the first kind of was that the 0 to 1 moment for you?
So I think I had the 0 to 1 moment earlier than that. I felt just so much magic in so many different areas. I could not believe what I was seeing and understanding and viewing. It was just rewiring my brain, how I thought about art and what makes art interesting, and that largely came from art blocks, bright moments, reading Tyler's literature, and a handful of other things that it just I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that this existed, and I had never known about it. And I don't think I would have got those same feelings seeing prints by Vera Molnar or some of the older generative artists. And they're legends, and I love their work, and I can appreciate it now. But at the time, I just didn't have the perspective to kind of have it all come together. And seeing the tech and the art kind of fuse together in interesting ways using the blockchain, I think was that real kind of holy shit moment for me. Um, and so the project that I published with Tyler, that came out of just pure I was just super genuine about how I looked about his art. Like I at the time it was just all NFTs, NFTs, NFTs. That's all anyone cared about. I would go into Discords and like talk about art, and people just did not care. I mean, I think I got booted out of one Discord
Okay.
for trying to like be thoughtful about something and not talk about the floor price or whatever. But and that was kind of the difficult part of this whole space was like, okay, I just don't belong here. But I fought through it, and um, that project was birthed out of me taking a more traditional approach to Tyler and a more genuine approach to his art and his world. I just became obsessive with the way that he thought about the work and his potential to work in different mediums. That was one of the things that really excited me as well. And so we just kind of bonded over that, over the idea that like, what if we did silkscreen prints? Have you explored this medium, and what would that look like? Because it's very applicable to code based art, and we just ran with that, and it was awesome because I think that was a real eye opener to a lot of people in the space I came to prior, more traditionally. And that was my kind of first curation. Um, and people just they really connected with the work. And it was cool to have an idea and kind of see the whole vision kind of come through. Um, and Tyler just killed it. The work was just amazing. And it was just very representational of, I think, a lot of what makes him an interesting artist. Um, and so I was very proud of that series, and that was yeah, that was like a holy shit moment, I think, for people in my past, more in the traditional side, to be like, whoa, okay, like Steven's presenting something here that like we've never really seen before, and we don't know the artist. Um, so yeah, maybe more 0 to 1 for outsiders, and it was cool. It was cool to see that.
And what were some of the perceptions then, I guess, when once Tyler had actually released those works and the screen printed prints were actually being displayed, like that people could go up and see, and then actually like come to an understanding that everything was algorithmically generated. Like were a lot of people surprised? Did you find that it was that people appreciated it as much as you do? Kind of like, what was that like? Because I know for me, when I was walking down the hallway and I saw those prints, I was in love, but also I was already pretty deep into the space at the time. So I'm always curious about what it's like for someone on the outside peeking in, and especially with Tyler being such a rock star in our space, I'm particularly interested to hear about like what those perceptions are kind of like.
Yeah, it was I think it was a very wide range of emotions. I think pretty instantly people realized that there was something there. Because too, the way that we presented it was a grid, like a 6x2 grid, 12 total works. And he just did a really good job at showing the range, something that a lot of people in our space talk about of what a range of an algorithm looks like. And he's also just super good, super at like arranging colors and kind of matching them in an interesting way. Um, and so that kind of combination of just like the presentation, the way that the colors come through in the prints because they're silk screened and he's just amazing at color. Um, they were kind of real like pull you in factors that I think people and this was like my initial goal and everything that I approached Tyler with was I want people to just make their own opinions on the work. I don't want them to be I think you're talented enough, or I knew at the time, but it was like I want people to see that talent and that and all your ideas by the work standing alone and talking for itself. And so, you know, a lot of people naturally just started asking questions about it. And um, I think it's fun to take that angle. And that's what I've consistently done for the past 5 years, or 3 years, however long it's been. Um, because I think that a lot of artists in our space are talented enough that their art can speak for themselves. And we don't need all the technical kind of like additional blockchain gravy, even though I love it. I stand for all of it. And I nerd out over it. But um, people naturally just wanted to learn more. They when they discovered that it was code, I mean, their minds blew up even more so. They're like, I don't understand. You got to take me through the process and what does this look like and stuff. But at the same time, they could also just understand that it was a work of art, just like anything else. Um, so yeah, I'm obsessed with this hybrid opportunity that we can do things online and on the blockchain, and we can also do things in person and present them in nice ways. Um, that to me has been the biggest onboarding mechanism.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, I kind of feel the same way. I have definitely a soft spot for the physical, either printmaking or paintings. So, but then equally in love with, especially when it comes to, um, algorithmically generated artworks. So I do think that intersection of the digital and the physical, I think that's where my soft spot is for sure. I'm kind of curious, just like your take real quick on in the long form generative art space. You have an artist that creates an algorithm. That algorithm produces randomized outputs, and the end result is you have a collection of randomized outputs that were generated from a single algorithm. In the case of with Tyler's prints, so that means that he basically ran the algorithm and then hand selected kind of outputs that resonated with him. And he went in, he kind of curated this collection of, I guess, 12 outputs to wrap up the entire collection. So
Yep.
what's your do you have any opinion on that? I know that you sometimes have some spicy opinions, so this is going to be like maybe the first potential spicy opinion on the podcast. But just do you have any general take on that? On if an artist develops an algorithm and they either have this long form release it out into the wild, whatever comes out, versus going in and hand selecting outputs.
I think as long as the artist is super intentional about the way that they're doing it and why they're doing it that way, then for the most part, I think I'm cool with it. Um, in the IOStream case, I think because the works were being represented through silkscreen, through silkscreen prints, um, it made sense to show the randomness in a very particular way to show what a super minimalist kind of, I mean, the whole series was somewhat minimalist, but um, show what a very minimalist work was versus more of a maximalist work, um, and kind of how the negative space shifted through each work. Um, and so I think if you go a more long form approach in that, using that model that we did, how does it come through? Why is it necessarily like needed? And I don't think that it is, because it's such a small body of work. There's only 12 of them.
Exactly.
Um, I think the idea of long form, is one brilliant, but it also, I think, speaks to very directly that there needs to be a much bigger body of work. It could even be 100, right? Um, but I think it needs to be a range, and a bigger range to really be represented as long form. Um, that's my understanding of it. Obviously, there's a million ways to look at it, but if you're going to publish 10 works, I think that publish the best 10 works. That should always be in the front of the artist's mind, is why are these things interesting? Why am I doing it this way? Um, if I do it another way, will the best works occur? Will they appear? Will people understand them? Um, and best is obviously subjective. It could be something that nobody likes, but it still has its place. And so I think it's very impressive for someone to publish a long form series that garners a lot of attention and interest. Um, but you kind of need to have like a niche understanding of like what long form is, and it's much deeper, especially when you're like analyzing one, um, than just a big body of work. 500 unique works like may not um, may not kind of represent the ideas of long form. Um, it's more so the technicalities of it and perspectives and how it all kind of comes together and showing the breadth of the algorithm. Um, but I don't necessarily think that generative art as a genre only needs to be pigeonholed into long form. There can be a lot of ways that generative art is represented. Um, and just to give you another example, like that same year that we showed Tyler's work, we also showed a painting. And this painting was one output from an um, early Fidenza algorithm, and it was a blue flow field that was, I'm forgetting the medium, but not spray paint, but um, airbrush. It was airbrush.
Airbrush, yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Uh,
I remember seeing that.
robotic arm, and and that has nothing to do with long form, but it's still beautifully represented in this bigger genre of generative art. So yeah, it's a very interesting kind of um, way of thinking about how this all comes together, and I think it just takes like a ton of time, and a lot of people who are like just like super into it and super passionate about it to kind of like tell the story for it to kind of go mainstream, or for it to be like better understood.
For sure. It's interesting because when you say mainstream, like I'm always curious too of what it what the coming years will really look like for our space and kind of like, let's say, the niche of long form on chain generative art. Like, is that something that you think will have this kind of mass appeal where there will be, millions of people around the world that understand and are connecting with that art form? Um, or do you think that it will kind of remain niche, a little bit more niche with like a smaller group of people that are like passionately advocates and collectors and artists of the space. What are your thoughts on that? And I know it's probably a tough question because it's like only time will tell.
Yeah, I think it really depends on like your time horizon. Does it go mainstream in the way that people talk about it in the next 5 years? I don't think so. Um, could it go mainstream in 50 years? Maybe. Depends on how much effort and resources and depends on, I guess, the entirety of the space. If we're willing to come together in a way that we really want to grow it and scale it, then yeah, I think in 50 years it could be mainstream. But that's a lifetime for me, right? Like I'm going to be spending the rest of my lifetime trying to get people to understand this stuff. And maybe those efforts don't pay off until, you know, my grandchildren are like, maybe then it's like just common knowledge, right? But that's kind of the fun part. I think for a while I was like kind of bummed about that. I was like, why
Huh.
aren't we making progress? It kind of just felt like we were just dragging along for a while. And now we are making progress in kind of different ways. Like we see some institutional adoption, we see kind of the two worlds kind of intertwining, which is great. I think it's amazing. It's everything that I stand for. It's everything that I kind of hope for. Um, but it's going to take a lot of that. It's not just like a one and done. I'll do it a few times and then like just stick to our roots. Like no, it's like do it over and over and over and over again. Where in 10 to 20 years, people just become accommodated to it, right? They're just like they see these artists that we all know and love. And they see it every year, like that's how you get people to really start to become comfortable and want to engage with it. Um, because think about how much time you and I spent just in this world learning about generative art. Like that is a lifetime for most people, like not, it's almost a different language. And so how do we communicate that language? Um, that's a like major challenge. That's the biggest barrier to entry is like um, not only within art, but it extends to crypto and blockchain and and the infrastructure and the security and the custody. And there's just so many moving parts. Um, so yeah, perhaps it remains niche, but I think that's okay. I don't. I'm starting to more and more this past year. I've started to believe that we're early. It's cliche, but that's the opportunity, right? Is that like we get to kind of pioneer the rules and contribute in ways that are meaningful when nobody's really paying attention.
Yeah, for sure, man. That definitely resonates. And I know that, this upcoming, like next month, we have Art Basel that's happening in Miami. I know that you'll be at the Art Miami this year. Yeah. Okay. And you've been there for a few years, right?
Yeah,
So I think that this is going to be a pretty big year in Miami, probably for the blockchain art space.
I think so.
So is there anything that you can speak to that you're going to be kind of like showing at Art Miami, and maybe just your general thoughts too about everything that's going on at Art Basel this year?
Definitely. Um, we haven't announced it yet, but I'll tell you, and I can talk after if you want to include it or not.
Okay, sure.
We're showing some new ACK work. Um, 6 big paintings that use this new process called chroma and it's just these like layers on layers of UV pigments that kind of stack on top of each other and just provide these deep textures. And the works are under this series called Clown Party. And so it's uh it's a work that it's different, it's unique. I don't think the traditional world and the art fairs are prepared for this kind of work, which really excites me. You know, like it's going to be fresh, it's going to be new, it's going to be
Cool.
unique, and I think they're going to um, engage in a new way. Um, and when I first saw this work, maybe a year or two ago, um, it was just like I just latched onto it. It was just like this is different. Like I hadn't really seen anything like it, and the colors and the palettes were different than what ACK usually does. And I've been a fan of his for a long time. I've written a few articles and just really engaged with the way that he uses blockchain as kind of in a performative way. Um, and I like the idea that he's willing to explore different mediums. Um, I think that kind of is where my real passion and interest lies, is these like multidisciplinary artists that are like just doing a bunch of interesting things on the blockchain, but also in the tangible realm. Um, and so these works are just like they represent just a very different moment in his life, and I think that'll come through in the work. And I'm very excited to see how people kind of engage with it because they're massive. They're like 5 feet by 5 feet, and
Wow.
and they're just super textural. And so even the technique is kind of fresh and new with interesting technology. Um, and there's
Mm.
NFT components as well that are more interactive, and I think they kind of add to the whole body of work
Mm.
than being something of more of like a replica. And I've been interested in that realm for a while, and I think ACK in this Clown Party series does one of the best jobs at representing like why these things can exist in interesting ways. Um, and you know, that's been like a real challenge. And a lot of people come to me for feedback or advice as to like, how do I, you know, reach both worlds and what's the best approach for that? And, you know, what kind of solution? And should we use chips for COAs? And should that be the NFT component? And there's this whole kind of ongoing commentary on it. And I used to be very opinionated. I used to be like, this is the best way to do it. And I've since evolved that. And I think that kind of the beauty of this is that I don't think there will ever be a like finite solution. And I think um there's a lot of beauty in that because it's not just like a one to one. It's not like buy this physical, get this NFT of the physical. Like that doesn't make that much sense. You know, it does if it's like a COA, but NFTs unlock so much potential. And if we really want to like lean into that, I think there are interesting ways to do it. And I think ACK does a really brilliant job at doing it in this series. And so you'll see over the coming weeks, kind of
That's
what I mean by
awesome.
that. But
Cool. Super exciting, man. That's great. And I mean, congratulations on getting to work with ACK. This sounds really cool. Worthy of a flight down to Miami, but I'll see if I can make it this year. We'll see.
for sure,
Um, and then also in Miami this year, there's going to be like a ton of different artists that in our space that I think are going to be showcasing work as well. So what are your thoughts on that? It seems like it's another, maybe a step function in kind of like the representation of our space, at least in our like kind of our Basel, Miami, like weekend. It seems like pretty exciting.
for
Yeah,
sure.
what are your thoughts on that?
I um I think it's amazing progress. Like that's it excites me that like there are real efforts and resources being put in to get exposure to this type of stuff. And like I said, it's going to happen over a very long time horizon. And so this is a really good first step from a major player in the art world to sort of start to embrace it. Um, but it's gonna have that, at least I hope, that trickle down effect of like hopefully more people in our space see the real opportunity in participating in that realm, because at the end of the day it's going to come back down to us. Do we want to put up the money? Do we want to put in the effort and the resources to like approach that world? Not step take a step away and wait for them to come to us, but we can actually go and engage directly with those kinds of people. And I hope that's an ongoing effort into the future. And this feels like a very, very good entry into that world. And I'm very excited to check it out for myself. Some of my favorite artists are being shown in that fair, um, and some of my favorite galleries and curators are also. So yeah, no, it's amazing to see.
That's awesome. Yeah, for sure, man. And it's a very kind of different vibe, most likely. But I think very important as well is Marfa, Texas.
Oh yeah.
So Marfa, Texas. So I know we just saw each other. What was it? Was it a month ago? I can't even remember. Yeah, it was in October, so about a month ago. So we saw you in Marfa this year. You came with your dad. Um, so what was your experience like in Marfa this year? And even more, just broadly speaking, like what's your perspective about Marfa, Texas, and kind of the importance of that IRL connecting within our space for the people that are already, deep down the rabbit hole.
I mean, it's such a like enlightening experience. Like it's so hard to describe or explain without going and actually experiencing it for yourself. And it's isolated. Um, I think intentionally, but also just because of what it is. And it's kind of just fascinating to me that there is like the Donald Judd Foundation through Chinati, and um, I can kind of experience art in ways that I've never experienced before. Um, and I think it's really cool that our community not only does our own things and our own side events, but just can like decompress and kind of soak in art through a completely different lens, whether that be like the stars in the sky. That's like a whole friggin' experience in and of itself. Like I live in New York City, I can't see one star any night of the week.
So sad. So sad.
Yeah, yeah. So it's just kind of like engaging with the events that go on, with the people that are there, and just kind of taking it all in. Has always been something that I've looked forward to. Um, and I didn't know at first what it was all about. This is my third year. Kind of gets better every year.
Same here.
Um, and so, yeah, like I don't know that I come out with any like tangible thing, but it's just like going through the motions of like getting there and seeing the people that I really appreciate and look up to and are some of my role models. Just having a conversation um, with like-minded folks in person, I think is almost is it's everything to me. Like I said, it's like my whole practice is built on hybrid experiences, and um, in a world that's super online, 24/7, I'd say. Um, what an incredible experience to be able to like put the phone down, get off the computer, and just have quality conversations in such a majestic place too. It's incredible.
Majestic. Yeah, it is, man. It is. Any highlights from this year, from your Marfa experience?
Um, I thought the Quine exhibition was awesome. The artist fair is always like a highlight for me. I spend like hours in there just like taking it all in.
Oh
Uh,
yeah. And actually on that note, man, seeing Harvey's Cove Height prints, oh
sure.
my God. I've
Yeah,
always wanted to see them. And yeah, they're just spectacular pieces of art, man. It's just amazing.
yeah.
So
Harvey's a treasure. He's just got an incredible work ethic. He's just super
yeah,
passionate about his ideas and executes at such a high level. And I think you could kind of see that through the Go
for
um,
sure.
the quality and the amount of attention to detail is just incredible. Um, so yeah, you know, those kinds of moments where I get to spend time with Harvey and Jack and Eric and, you know, watch people do his every day is just, I think those moments I'll remember for the rest of my life. Um, and who knows, right? Like maybe our space does progress and scales way faster than I, you know, intend, and maybe those conversations become fewer, or maybe it's like we're just so early that we're kind of like, you know, we're just like grandfathered into, you know, being able to like appreciate the closeness of all of it. Or who knows, like maybe this is just a new, maybe this is bigger than just a movement. Maybe this is a new whole world, right? Like that we're just like rebuilding the art world brick by brick, and this kind of closeness is kind of always present, you know, where it's like, yes, I think that some of the biggest artists and builders, and not only biggest but most important, are in this realm. But I think also the dynamics have just completely changed. And so yeah, it's exciting to be here now in this moment and get to experience Marfa, have conversations, experience Basel and Art Miami and all the other fairs. I think it's worth participating in. Um, yeah.
Oh yeah. Definitely, man. And I guess on the note with, speaking on Marfa, like what's your take on um the role that Art Blocks has had in this space? And also talking about the AB 500, the Art Blocks 500 collections kind of capping things off. Like what's your take on that as well?
Art Blocks has played such a massive role in my like development in the art world and in my thinking and in my perspective, and it's just completely changed like my entire career path, I think. And it's pretty fascinating to watch it evolve in real time and kind of see it go through this like roller coaster of like publishing like absolute animals like at such a high frequency to then like not publishing really at all. um it's been fascinating to watch, and it does make a lot of sense to me to kind of wrap it into this AB 500, because I do think it represents a moment in time. It represents something that I don't know will ever be replicated again. That kind of craze, that kind of attention and money inflows, and it's just it was wild. And so I think putting you know, tying a bow around that makes so much sense. Like it makes sense largely from a historical perspective to study these things. I don't think a lot of people took a second to breathe and be like, what's actually happening? I don't even think Art Blocks got the chance to do that. Um, there was just so much going on. So it's nice to maybe take a few steps back and start to appreciate the real beauty in each of the projects, or you know, several projects at a time, um, and tell the story. The story is so rich, and not a lot of people, I'd say, like understand like the entirety of it. I think the people who are here every day showing up maybe do, but there's other ways to communicate that and get people to kind of feel it again. Um, yeah, and that's like a fascinating thing to me because there's so many absolutely world-changing technologies or mechanics or people that did things on the blockchain that I wish there was like an easy way to relive. Um, I wish there was, with everything we have present in the world right now, I feel that maybe we're not leaning into um, the biggest potential opportunities of what blockchain can actually do, or how it can preserve, or how it can tell stories or provenance, um, how we can represent those things. And I probably would spend 5 minutes once a week like reliving the Fidenza Mint if there was a way to do it. But it's more so through like storytelling and communicating in interesting ways. And I think it's still because it's just it's so new. Everyone's still trying to wrap their head around it. Um, but I think that the efforts that AB will put in now that maybe they've start to kind of like have a few moments to breathe. I think we'll start to see more of it, and it'll really open up the potential to people who maybe half understood or have no understanding to then start to really kind of get that 0 to 1 feeling you and I first had. Um, I'm excited by that.
That's awesome, man. I know it's like, I'm not sure exactly how, how the upcoming years are going to look, but I hope at minimum that they're able to really maintain that strong leadership role, uh, and helping to kind of coordinate all of us to come out to Marfa once a year, because that to me is like it's an incredibly important piece of all of this, I think. And being able to just take those, 2, 3, 4, 5 days to be able to be with your people and to kind of celebrate this moment and to just um just appreciate, I guess, yeah, just each other, that the artists, like collectors, everybody in this space. It's just like it really does feel like a celebration. And you always come back, at least I do, I always come back just like feeling like almost like it's almost an existential thing, like almost feeling like this is like a part, has become a part of like my purpose, I feel like, so that's like I would say that's a pretty surprising outcome to someone like myself who kind of stumbled into this space back in 2021, and to feel so deeply connected to this movement and to connect so deeply with the people in this space has been like has really been super rewarding. And I do feel like the more um the more that people on the periphery end up learning and kind of falling into this space, I feel like I would be shocked if the space doesn't grow like like many multiples, like many multiples. Um, but for now, it feels a little bit kind of like that's an inevitability. But right now, we have this moment in time where we just got our small, driven community. I remember in Marfa, speaking of just being able to access certain people in the community and bump shoulders with artists and like just really like reputable people. I was sitting down at a table with Batsup Yum, and we were just like chit chatting, just very casual. This is that very horizontal nature of this community where you don't necessarily need to um, worry about hierarchical structures so much. But one thing that he was saying I don't want to put words in his mouth. I'll say broadly speaking, what we were talking about is how few active wallets there are like in this space when it comes to the digital art space. Um, and just thinking about that in this moment in time with the amount of people that you would think, based on all the trends that are kind of happening, there's so many trends that are happening that feels like they're converging. Um, and it feels like, you know, if there's huge influx of people that end up coming into the space, it's like, what does that mean for Marfa? What does that mean for that grassroots, kind of like community feel that I think all of us kind of have right now? And so I guess some of this, there might be an inevitability, and you just kind of have to accept the fact that, you know, everything in life changes ultimately, and you have to be able to accept that piece. But to be able to be here right now and to, be living this, experience right now where everything is, it feels like it's such a small community. Like you go to Marfa, you see all the same faces, like familiar faces. Like you do meet new people probably every single year, but it's like there really is like, half of the Marfa attendees are like the same people that just show up every year, right? So, anyways, it's just like with the things that you're saying resonate with me a lot. And yeah, it feels like we're really living in a moment in time. So I have a kind of a question about that. It's just like going with your gut, how do you think we'll look back on this moment in time in like 50 years? And also, can you see any similarities with like art movements in the past that you can kind of contrast with kind of what we feel like we're living through right now?
Yeah. Um, it feels inevitable to me that there are works and artists here that are and builders that are making very meaningful contributions to the whole canon. Um, that feels like inevitable. What exactly those will be, I think some are kind of already defined by consensus, and others will surprise people. And there's a lot of, I think, art in this realm that doesn't exist already that will become important. Because I think a lot of these artists too are very early in their careers. They're kind of just getting started. When I say that, I mean like 10, 15 years in. Um, and so even the progression to a mid-career artist, I think a lot of these talented artists are going to be contributing meaningful bodies of work to the whole idea towards blockchain based art and what these artists stand for. Um, in terms, so I guess like what I'm trying to say is like 50 years is a long time, and it feels already obvious and inevitable that these times right now will be studied and archived in art history, and there will be people who have the knowledge to talk on it, that are living through it right now, um, and they will carry the stories on, represent it, and people will have wished that they saw it, that they felt it, um, and it's I think it's easier said than done to actually be here and be participating in it, because it's kind of like a little war. Um, and the reason I say that is because I think a lot of people like struggle. There's just so many different colliding things, whether that be perspectives or intentions or just the financialization of all of it. That it's pretty taxing mentally. Um, and so we're gonna really go through it, I think, in 50 years. It's gonna be quite the story. And it's really just getting started. But in terms of art movements, I mean, it feels so alike in a lot of ways where, a lot of the biggest art movements were kind of rejected at first. And we're like literally living through that. Um, but it's funny because perhaps they're rejected for different reasons. And I think maybe that we've been rejected because we haven't really told the story in a way that's friendly. I think that's one way. It's very abstract, it's very difficult to kind of get your mind to understand these things. There's not a lot of resources to kind of like lean on. You kind of just have to be in the know. And I don't think that's like a good expectation set. Um, but it's similar in the realm that we've just faced rejection from the general population. Um, and I think, the impressionists and the pop artists and um, photography, like, these little movements started through rejection. It started with a group of people who really understand it with a lot of depth and were really passionate and just kept pushing regardless. They just understood the weight that it held. And I think we have that same energy here. If not, maybe it's not as, I don't think there were that many people that started in those movements either. They ended up becoming big, um, but also big. It's like that some of them are just still niche. They never really grew to some crazy scale that maybe they once thought of, right? Um, how many people like minimalist work? It's a niche group of people, it's not for everyone. It's understandable, a soft shape and a mostly, white canvas. Not everyone's going to appreciate that. Not everyone's going to love that. And I think that's the beauty of art. I think more and more people in our world are, if not, if they don't understand it now, will adapt and, adopt that mindset that this work that I'm buying is not for everyone. It's for me, and that's the most important thing. Um, because I don't think art is necessarily doing its job if it's consensus or if it's for everyone. Um, I'm not sure that that's my definition of art, or how I understand it. It has to speak to me for me to have any interest in it in the first place.
I think that's fair. Very fair take. Yeah. I agree with a lot of these points that you're sharing. So what role do you think we have, let's say, as individuals, as people in this community versus the traditional institutions, these kind of like these galleries and museums, what role do you think that they have or will have to play in the storytelling piece to help people kind of understand the depth of these artists and their works and this movement, even broadly speaking. um if there's a gap in understanding and gap in knowledge, um then that would be suggestive that there's a lot of untapped people out there who, through the right communication style or giving them time to absorb like the works and kind of like the whole concept, um that they would that the light bulb would turn on for them as well, right? So what role do you think that we have to play versus some of these traditional, like museums, things like that?
I think the biggest thing that we can do is publish interesting work, and get attention that way. Because to me, it's like otherwise it feels kind of artificial. It feels like it can kind of come and go. I don't know how much like lasting power there is. And I guess what I mean by that is like art that you cannot, you have to pay attention to, you know, um, because it's interesting, regardless of medium or, this artist is making interesting work. Um, and then, other people, it's like, well, you can write literature, you can write essays, you can, post on social media, write threads. Um, but you can also mark up the chain in interesting ways. There's no laws. There's no permissions that anyone needs to do anything interesting, but it's something to point to in history. And so, I wish a lot of our dialogue and commentary was through more native blockchain ways so that we could point to it in the future, um, and say, I was here, I did this thing, I made this comment, I wrote this essay. Um, and because I think that that will be the way to prove that you were here, you were making meaningful contributions. You know, Nobody can deny that. Um, Otherwise, I don't know what the future of Twitter looks like, or so much stuff gets lost in my email or through text message, or that perhaps if I were publishing it publicly, I could be, sharing new insights or perspectives, or, you know, maybe spark an idea for someone to build something. But that's just not the way that the infrastructure and the tech is set up, and there's all politics around our opinions and how we feel about certain artists and art. And it's the collision of the, self-taught artist with the trained artist and the popular artist, being roped into sales. And I think the politics of our world has, because it's so transparent, and because regardless of your status, it's all bundled into one, provides tons of challenges. And so I don't know if that answered your question, but
Sure. Yeah, it's very, very interesting. Is there, can we maybe jump in and discuss the Stephen Santoro studio?
yeah,
Is that something you can talk about?
yeah, I would love.
So yeah, so I'd love to dig into that. And if you can kind of speak to it, I also have a quote here. I'm not sure if you want me to read it, but it's a quote that you have on the website.
Go for it.
Okay. So you say that this website is my studio, a space to host my ideas, experiments, and evolving perspective. I'm no longer asking for permission or writing essays that go unread. I'm minting, indexing, and distributing work with intention and pace. Own it, cherish it, and help me push the space forward. Oh, push the space further. Sorry. Um, so tell me about Stephen Santoro's studio, and also, what you mean by this.
Yeah. So I was at a point like a year ago where I was just like very frustrated with my own contributions. Obviously, had curated a lot of projects, or a lot for myself at least, up until that point. And I just felt like I have all this knowledge into this world that nobody understands and nobody gets. And, you know, how do I want to like leave a legacy, or, how do I want to be studied in the future? And I was just thinking about the way that I was viewed in this world. I knew, and I still believe that I have the respect of the people, of some of my, what I think some of the most important people in our space. But there was no like tangible way of demonstrating that. Um, and I think it's demonstrated through the works that I curate. And I think that's one way of my contributions being, kind of associated to myself. But I wanted something um, more representative of the way that I feel, and more tangible thing to kind of give to the space. And so with the rise of AI in the past few years, I started picking up programming, and I think that was one of the biggest missing parts of my skill set was that I have a lot of ideas. I'm very like thoughtful and intentional with the way that I want to do things. And that is it's hard when you have all these relationships with artists and they have their own experiences. They come from different backgrounds. They want to do things that they want to do, or maybe they don't want to do things at all. Um, and so that was kind of a disconnect for me, is that I was super passionate about certain things and I wanted things for artists that perhaps they didn't want for themselves. I can't force someone to do something. Um, and so I thought a lot about, well, what if I could just do that thing myself? Um, and so I just started teaching myself how to program, started learning the tools, and AI has been just an unbelievable help in all of that. It's kind of made it possible for me. Whereas in the future, I mean, not the future, in the past, I've made attempts at going down that route, and I've just found it way too difficult. It just didn't feel like it was worth my time because I don't know what the end result would be. I don't know how long it would take. Um, and now it's kind of, it still takes a long time to do it the way that I want, but I at least I can have control and I can do things exactly the way that I want. And I can demonstrate my thoughts and perspective through more tangible ways, whether that be publishing websites, minting NFTs. Um, and it's cool because by doing these things, it's kind of making them more permanent to a degree. It's actually like, yeah, if I can sell work and live off of it or whatever, like that's fantastic. But at least now, when you study these times or these people that are making contributions, like I can point to things um, that represent my ideas, and a lot of my ideas are trying to get people to understand the things that I love and believe in, and a lot of those things are artists in our space. And so it's like I'm kind of trying to tell stories through other people's work. Appropriation is one of my favorite art forms because it's stealing and copying, other people's ideas and other people's works and recontextualizing them in new and interesting ways. Um, and so really leaning into that, my studio's kind of given me a place where I can represent those ideas in a more central location. Um, that hopefully gives you some insight into how I think things should be presented, how I think a user experience should look like. Um, touch on little um, ideas that I know are trending that I just see that day. Um, track blockchain data through the trace page and see who owns what, and kind of signify through different interface elements that like this should exist and it's behind the scenes, but I'm bringing it to the front end because I think it's interesting. Um, I think the more that I kind of just throw shit at the wall, the more like proud I am of actually being here in this moment. Whether that's through other people's work or through my own work now. Um, it exists, and I think that having it exist is the most important thing. It gives people an outlet to talk, to see the execution come through. And it's really just so much untapped potential, I think, to really go deep on what we can do with this technology. And I'm just excited to now have a more centralized home to express myself and the things I've been thinking about for a long time. Um, So it's a mix of frustration and passion um and a way to kind of just wrap my ideas in one centralized place.
That's awesome, man. Dude, huge congrats on taking that step.
Thank you.
Um, and the website's really cool. I think it's a really interesting vibe you got going on. So it's really cool. Um, and you want to maybe touch on then not enough eyes?
Yeah. I I created this body of work called Not Enough Eyes because the things that interest me the most in the art world have always been the things that go on beyond, behind the scenes. It's the struggle and the failures and the experiments that never kind of they never see like the light of day. And there were there's a lot of body of works that I think the only way that they get framed are through the lens of like sales. Like people only really talk about things that sell. And to me, the sales are kind of the least interesting part of these objects. It's like I want to know how they're made, why they're made. I want to know like where does the artist come from, where they get this idea. That's always been far more interesting to me. And so this series was kind of built around the idea that like it's the artists that I appreciate making bodies of work that people love, but it's through the lens of like either a first person perspective of them actually making these things and going through the process. And I think it's a cool way to kind of signify that like the end product or the thing that you actually own is it's through the blood, sweat, and tears. And I hope to kind of that's kind of demonstrated in those types of works. And the people who go deeper and actually read the descriptions, it's like I just jam packed, just like they're almost like little essays in and of themselves. If you click the info tabs, you can read the descriptions of the work, and I think it's some of my best writing. Um, that kind of again, it's like little like relics of like Alejandro carpoolers. Well, it's like this is like a fun way to kind of understand how I feel about that series. Um,
That that's awesome, man. No, it's super cool. And how did you go about selecting these artists? Because it's 10 one of ones, right?
yeah, it's an ongoing series. Um, I think a lot of again, like a lot of the ways that we think about blockchain art are like defined, and to me, it's like we're still trying to figure out like what's best. Like we don't know how to necessarily think about these things. Like we're still like figuring it out. And it goes back to the whole like physical digital. It's like I don't think there'll ever be like a solution. There's just like with digital objects like and series, it's like this is purposely an open series. Like I hope to continue to contribute work to Not Enough Eyes as I have the bandwidth to do it. So it's like there are another 30 series and artists that I will put inside of this contract. Um and there's no kind of order for importance or there's I just kind of went with my intuition. Um but I like the idea that like the people buying these works, even I think it was a few $100s per work. Um, they're not buying them to flip, like there's no value in them. The value is in the bytes, which I brought to the forefront. They're fully on chain works, so you own the data, and I hope to be able to tell. a larger story in that realm as well. Um, but yeah, it's an ongoing series, so it's cool that people connect with them and just want to own them and contribute to my little history and story. Yeah, I sold 9 out of 10, which I was super proud of. So
I love that, dude. That's sick. I love that it's a you're leaving space for more work to be done in this collection. And
there's so many more
yeah, it'll
stories
be
to tell.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm for sure. Um who would you say are some of your favorite artists right now?
I mean, I'm gonna be biased for the people that I work with. But you know, Tyler, ACK, Did, Harvey, Rhinotic, Alejandro, Snowfro, Emily, yeah, Bushi. Um, I'm definitely missing people, but Artemis, I think he's brilliant. Um, there's a lot more. Yeah, but that's just a quick string.
For sure. And do you find yourself gravitating towards a certain um like within blockchain art, let's say, you have photography, you have the use of AI, you have long form generative, you have one of one, like digital paintings or drawings. Do you find yourself gravitating towards any specific kind of niche there, or do you feel like you're kind of just like unbiased blank kind of like slate, and every time you're looking at an artwork it's just like it's just you and the artwork and there's no other bias?
I'm so happy you asked that question because our space has this weird fetish over like it's AI art, you know? It's generative art. You should care because it's these things. It's like, why? You know? Why should I care because it's AI art or it's early, you know? It's like I don't care that it's early. It's like, is it good? Um, so for me, it's always been like I would be doing myself a disservice if I just paid attention to categories within art, or if I talked about art within the context of categories. Feels like a complete disjustice. Because in my opinion, it's like at the end of the day, it's like the art is has to be interesting for the ideas that are like baked inside of it. Um, in the context of the times, in the context of the moment, and obviously like the genre is an easy way to like reference. But I just think it's overemphasized. Um, and so for me, it's just like if the artist is important, if the work is important to the artist within their career and there's reasoning behind why they're doing such a thing, it doesn't necessarily matter to me if it's like generative or AI or on chain or photography. Um, that being said, I'm definitely biased towards things that use the blockchain in native ways. Um, and I'm probably like a purist in that way. Um, but it's just like I find it really fascinating that you can do work and it can exist really only in this moment. And I'm kind of fascinated by that because blockchain provides constraints and constraints in very amazing ways. Um, and it costs money, real money to lean into those constraints. Um, and I think that's a massive feature that maybe a lot of artists don't fully understand. Um, so yeah, I'm kind of biased for people who really have a good understanding of the fundamentals and technicalities of blockchain.
That's cool. Yeah. um does the blockchain matter, like which blockchain, like
Of
if you're
course.
looking at Ethereum? Yeah.
To me, it does.
Okay. And I'm guessing you have a lean towards Ethereum?
Yes, for sure.
Okay. As do I. But, what do you, what's your perception on the relationship between cryptocurrency, like the native cryptocurrency, let's say, of the blockchain and said blockchain that people are actually, keep you know, keeping their art on?
Um, yeah, it's an interesting question. Um, I don't necessarily know how to exactly think about it. Like crypto has almost become it's just like an asset to me almost. And I think really early on I just separated the ideas that I have between crypto and blockchains. I just think that they're two completely different things. Um, I think a lot of people just maybe only understand crypto and don't see how the blockchain plays a role, you know? Because it's more of like a financial thing. It's more of like an asset that fluctuates and they pay with these things. And so they kind of just approach it from a transactional perspective. But I guess it's because, I work with artists who use the substrates, they use it as a medium. Um, and so I've just the architecture of blockchain and the technicalities of it have always been at the forefront for me. And so I just kind of view crypto as a way to, you know, invest or transact or um yeah, it really hasn't I haven't cared for crypto too much outside of just like some, investing and participating in experiments and collecting. Um that's just where my interests have lied.
Okay, cool. Um, so, I wanted to ask, I've heard you speak on this, uh, point before, but what's your take on the the supply of art from an artist? What's your general take on that?
Um I think it comes back to intentions. Like if they're just very intentional about the way that they go upon their business, um, I don't believe in the ideas that like artists shouldn't publish because of supply or their market. I don't subscribe to that. It's like these artists are like in their 30s, a lot of them. Like they're gonna be working for the next 50 years. Like we've seen nothing, you know? We've seen just a fragment of what they're gonna produce. And they're gonna get a hell of a lot better. Um, and I think people it's hard for them to wrap their head around that. Um, because I think they're coming from it from a financial standpoint as, that's kind of to be expected. Um, and so I've called myself this a few times, but I'm almost like just I don't know how to just like an artist champion. And it's just like artists are like a lot of them are vulnerable and they don't want to like approach those kinds of conversations. And so I feel this kind of obligation to like step in, and that's kind of where some of my hot takes come from is like you need to like back off from these people because they're dedicating their whole life or like maybe life until this point to come up with the energy and the it takes a lot to like get to that point of publishing. And that, if that comes back to this not enough eyes collection is to like I want to put more attention on what comes prior and not what comes after, because what comes after is not nearly as interesting. Um, and so to answer your question, it's just got to be intentional, and it's okay if work doesn't sell. Like we need to like having inventory is not it's a feature, it's not a bug. Um, and not every series is going to connect with everyone, right? And I think there's some beauty in having something that sits, that finds the people that appreciate it. Um, but it's hard because a lot of artists get slammed for it. You know, they feel like they're like a failure if they like work on these things for a long time and then nobody cares. It's like it's all transparent, and then people start selling your other work, and it's just a very, very hard landscape to navigate. And I think the sooner you break that um, psychological like manifestation in people's head that like these things need to hold value from because the artist is like not making them available, the sooner you break that thinking, then people start, I think, buying things for the right reasons. Um, and not saying that you know that reason can't be investment or making money or whatever. Of course it can. We're on the future of the financial rails. But the more people that you can attract that just want to own it for the ideas that you bake into these things, I think the better off, you know, the easier of a time you'll. Not that it's ever going to be easy. It'll never be easy, but um, getting over that hump of that um, scarcity and you know, limited, and you know, I think you'll be more convicted in everything you do, and you'll have more confidence.
Because were you saying this? Were you saying this in the context of advice for artists or for collectors?
I think it's everyone. I think yeah, I think things. Think if we just look at the history and time, it's just like, especially in the art world, it's like things become valuable because of like the stories that are baked inside of them, the people that make them, what they had to go through, and it's the entirety of that baked into this object. And it's not like a few objects like influence the value of another object. Like of course they're correlated to some degree, but it's just like some of the most famous artists have had works that have sat, works that nobody cared about for 10 years. Um, I don't see that evolving or changing with blockchain. Um, it's just easier to manipulate. So artists get taken advantage of.
For sure. Okay, man. I think we're like wrapping up here. I just want to ask, like, what are some of the things that are the most exciting to you right now in the space?
Um, the upcoming art fairs for sure. Um, so excited to see kind of all the presentations and again meet people in person and see, you know, go through the gauntlet of Art Miami. Um, that's definitely what I'm looking forward to. And then publishing my own stuff. I got another big big idea that I'm gonna publish in January. That I'm really hyped about. As well as we got another I got another project with Did coming. It's like an on-chain game. He's so brilliant. Just what an amazing artist. Um, I think it's been cool to see how he's progressed in the few years that I've known him, and um, just I think gonna be one of the most important artists on the blockchain. Not a lot of people see it right now. Um, well, that's not true. You know, people do see it, just I guess more like within different realms of our world. And I think he's just doing fascinating things that I'm proud to be like playing little roles in. Um, so yeah, those three things, and yeah, ACK's project I think is gonna be just unbelievable, and I'm excited for people to like engage with it in person and really see the depths that he goes to integrate both components and how they kind of um, how they're positioned. He's just super intentional and thoughtful about it.
Awesome, man. That's great. And we'll have to maybe touch base in the coming months when you're ready to, I guess, release your project or talk about your project, I'll say. Um, so that's super exciting, man. Well, I really appreciate you making the time to come on, man. I think it was a really great conversation. I always love talking with you. You got a lot of really interesting perspectives. I'd say any final perspectives, or, words of advice or just anything you want to kind of share with the audience here.
Um, no, thanks for having me. This was a pleasure, and just keep publishing is my biggest advice. Whether that's for you through your podcast, like it's amazing to be able to publish at this level. I feel honored along with all the other guests that you've had on here. But to all the artists out there too, just publish at a rate as fast as you possibly can. And, that still might be very slow, but there's no better time than yesterday to push out that work. Um, so yeah,
I
thanks
love
for
that,
having
man. Yeah, man. And how can people reach you if if they want to ask you any questions or touch base
me. Yeah.
for whatever reason?
Email, Twitter, Discord. It's Stephen Santoro, my name. I'm like the only docs person in this space. I'm kidding. There's some more, but yeah.
Cool, man. Okay, well, man, thanks again for coming on, and yeah, look forward to seeing you soon, either Miami, maybe in California, and if not, for sure in Marfa next year, I'm sure.
Love it. Thanks for
Cool,
having me.
man. Cool, man. Okay, talk soon.
Take care.
All right. Hope you enjoyed the conversation. Feel free to subscribe to the podcast on Spotify and YouTube, and give me a follow on Twitter at longformart. As mentioned, none of this is financial advice. This is for entertainment and information purposes only. More information can be found in the podcast episode description. Thanks so much for listening in. I'll be back soon with another episode.